your most valuable 5 minutes a day. That as a leader, you get up intentionally every day, take 5 minutes and go connect with an employee. Just go chat. How are you? How you doing? How are things going? Talk to me a little bit. Make those connections. Because when I started doing that in that job that the petition was written on, it turned things around. And that's where I understood the value of connecting with people and building those relationships just beyond doing the job. But I never would have learned that if I hadn't made that major mistake.
Hello and welcome to the Connectors Podcast. This week we are joined by Chris McAuley, speaking coach, business storyteller, and seasoned actor. With over 35 years of business experience and background in more than 40 stage and film productions, Chris blends performance and leadership to help professionals master public speaking, build trust, and revitalize workplace culture through his company, MCAVOY Inc. As part of our Redefining Leadership series, we'll explore why business is ultimately about connection and how leaders can create the time and space to truly connect with the people they have the privilege of leading. We'll also dive into what intentional leadership looks like compared to more traditional approaches and why failures, obstacles, and mistakes, often seen as setbacks, are actually some of the greatest gifts leaders can receive. Welcome to the show today, Chris.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for episode 1 of our new season. It's exciting to have you. Thank you for being on board.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that you recently launched your updated version of your website.
That's right.
I want to know what a speaking coach and what a leadership coach, what is the filtering that goes on in your mind to decide what goes forward to show your clients? How do you choose what goes on your website?
Wow. Great question. I think, while being a speaking coach, I think one of the things that I really wanted to do, and as I mentioned to you, it is a new website. I still have to add a few things in. The one thing that's missing on there that I really wanted to add is a video of me speaking, which I think is really, really important. So that's one thing I want to have, is that video. You've probably seen those websites where the print comes on the screen, but in the background there's a video running that you obviously can't hear the audio, but it's running. That's kind of what I want to see. So when you hit that first homepage, you see me speaking. Because I think as a speaking coach, not that I speak that much, but I do speak in engagements, I certainly wanted to convey that message right up front. So that's one of the first things I wanted to put out there. And then, really it was about the standard things that you really want to drive home on a website, addressing those pain points, which really, when it comes to speaking and being a leader, I've met very few people who are not nervous when it comes to speaking, whether it be in a board meeting or whether it be in front of 100 people or so. So it was definitely addressing those pain points. I wanted to make sure that they were out there as well, and really hitting that emotional piece too. So I used a lot of stuff on my website around, if you're that individual that feels terrified when your name is called and you have to speak, or you get up there and you're fearful of freezing, or you do freeze and you're not sure what to do, I really wanted to address all those points. And then really the overall connection was just coming back to the fact that I don't think I've ever met a really solid, successful business leader that was not a good speaker. So the two come hand in hand. I think you have to be able to do both quite well to be effective. Although I have met leaders who've been fairly successful and not great speakers, that's fine. But I think it's such an important, critical skill for anyone in business that I really wanted to address that as well, that it also helps in business also. So just those are the things that I really focused on.
Mm-hmm. I want to know, okay, let's backtrack, Chris, because you've spent a lot of time in an acting career, and obviously you're passionate about speaking, you're passionate about leadership, you're passionate about helping others be a great speaker. And I want to know about little Chris and where he came from and what can you look back and see and sort of reflect and see where you wanted to step into that version of you? What started this off for you in terms of wanting to be on the stage and wanting to be a speaker?
Good question.
Yeah. I was, as far back as I can remember, I was that kid that would perform movies. So I'd watch a movie and I'd be so enthralled by the movie and so impacted by it. I would go into my bedroom and I'd recreate the whole thing. I'd be every part. I'd be the movie star. I would do all that stuff. And music was a huge influence on me. So I always wanted to be that rock star. My dad brought me up on jazz music. He was a jazz aficionado, so he used to drag me to jazz concerts. So I used to do the air saxophone, and I used to pretend like I'd put the music on, and then I'd pretend I was in the concert. So I think from a very young age, I always loved performing. There was just that feeling of getting up in front of a room and performing and putting on an act. It just really, I always wanted to do it. I had so much fun, and it was a nice escape. And I did that for a long time. It was always a real passion of mine. I think that's where it started. So, and then as I worked through, I was also never really fearful. I don't recall, as I mentioned with my website, I had nerves and I was nervous speaking in front of people, but it wasn't so stifling for me. I actually was able to get over it fairly quickly. I was nervous before I spoke, but once I got up, I was always the guy that volunteered to speak in the class, and I was not uncomfortable. When you had to get up and do a book report, all those things we had to do in school. I never felt uncomfortable doing that. So I think I always felt there was that performer piece in me, and I just wanted to have that. I wanted to have as part of my life. However, I never wanted to live the actor's life. I got to admit that. I got to say, hey, I'll raise my hand and say, yeah, I chickened out on that. I did not want to live sort of that. It's hard because I knew a few artists, I knew a few people, and I used to hear stories about what people used to do. Yeah, sure, you hear the glamour stuff. We always hear the good stuff about being a performing artist if you're successful. But of course, it's like a lot of things. No one tells you the real hard work that it takes to get there and the life that people live before they get to that spot. So as I got older, I just thought to myself, I really like business, wanted to be part of business as well, but didn't want to live the actor's life. So I didn't want to go out and struggle to sort of make ends meet. So I guess you could say I was passionate about it, but maybe not that passionate.
So well, I don't know. There's different types of passion, and you said you chickened out on that part, but is it really, or maybe it just wasn't aligned to you and really what you wanted, right? Because you've taken it now and created something different out of that passion. But you're right, like we don't know about all the other struggles people go through when you're you think something looks awesome, some celebrity looks like they have this great lifestyle, or this actor, but what are all the hardships behind the scenes? And you're under the spotlight. Everybody knows about what you're doing and your lifestyle, and I think for me that part would be, I wouldn't want to be under the spotlight, so, and all that scrutiny. So I love how you've taken this and turned this into something that supports your business, but also supports obviously people trying to become a better speaker and step into that role. What do you find is when you're helping people to find their voice and to get on the stage and to share with impact? What do you find for most people is their biggest fear about doing that, and how do you help them through that?
It really is about making a mistake and freezing. I think that's what people feel. They get so embarrassed. I think that's the biggest thing, is that we're so worried about looking foolish in front of a group or just being embarrassed and we look bad. I mean, because often here we are, a very successful, confident business person, but when I get up in front of a room full of people, what if I make a mistake? I'm going to look bad. People are going to think ill of me. And that's really where I find most people really, really struggle. It's that concern about how they're going to look. I think that's the fearful piece. And the interesting thing about it is that there's this phenomenon. First of all, there's kind of two that works here, psychological phenomenons that I tell a lot of clients about. One is the spotlight effect, which is that whole idea that we think that when we get up in front of a room full of people, we think that 100% of the attention of the audience is on us. And yeah, the audience is listening and they're there, but they're not paying that much attention to you. They are, but it's not like 100% of their attention is on you. It's not all about you. And that's one of the first things I tell a lot of people when I work with them, is that always remember, it's about them. It's not about you. And then there is that illusion of transparency. And that is that thing that we feel that when we get up. So here I am up there, the spotlight effect's full on. I think everybody's thinking and looking and thinking about me and looking at me, and they're seeing everything. They're seeing my handshake. They're seeing my nerves come out. They're seeing my dry mouth. They're seeing my legs shake. They're hearing my shaky voice. We think that we can see everything and that we are fully transparent. The reality is we're not. it's an illusion. The audience doesn't see a lot of what we are feeling deep down inside. Our emotions are still hidden. They're not out there, but yet we think everybody can see those things. And so I work with people and reminding them, often really it's as simple as that. Before you go on, just remind yourself, it's not about me, it's about them. And the audience can't see all those things. I can feel it, but the audience can't. And it's amazing that when you practice that enough and when you work at that enough and remind yourself of that, it does lower your nervous energy a little bit. So that fear of making a mistake, we know we see it and we hear it, but often the audience doesn't pick up on it. And I'm sure if you've ever been in that position, where you do a presentation and you're up there, you get up and you deliver it. And often presenters and speakers, we give ourselves a score of like, oh, I'll give myself a 3 out of 10. I did terrible. I didn't say this. I didn't say that. Ask the audience. Most of the time, the audience is giving you a 7 or an 8. And they're saying, no, it was amazing. And so it's getting over that big piece of thinking that every mistake we do is going to be highlighted, and it's not. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I work with people on. Secondly, I can't emphasize enough preparation. Practice, 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 practice. You've got to run it. And I know that there's a lot of people, because we're busy, confident business professional. I got tons to do, and I got to get up and speak about something that I think about every day. And I get up and I pull together a quick presentation and say a few words. And that's fine. Sometimes that'll work. But most of the time you can do so much better. And it has so much more impact when you really practice the thought process, what it is you're going to say, what's the message I want the audience to remember. Have I really done a deep dive on my audience before I go on stage to really know what they don't know, what it is I have to tell them? Because it's always about, don't tell them what you know, tell them what they need to know. Is always the big secret with this. And so can't get around the preparation. And I've known some speakers, even myself included, I'll run a presentation 50, 60, 70, 100, like I'll run it continuously. And so I call it owning the material. And there is a process that I take a lot of clients through where they know it so well. They know what they're going to say so well. It's not about memorizing word for word. It's about knowing what you're going to say so well that no matter what happens, you'll find your way back. If you freeze, your slides don't work, any of those things happen, you'll be easy enough for you just to pick up and carry on, and the audience won't notice the difference. You might notice that you made a mistake again, but the audience won't see that. And that really happens when you own your material. It's about getting out of your head and getting into your heart. It's taking it from here to here, I think is one of the processes that I really focus on. So.
Wow, you've given me like 3 separate ideas. I've got all sorts of stories in my head on how to react and how to respond. And I think one of the big interesting differences is that I used to be a music teacher, so played violin, singing, and now play the ukulele. And it's very different to perform without an instrument, so to be a speaker, to present. And I have this like almost what's the feel like I'm sort of happy that I have an instrument in my hand, because it's like a crutch or something that I can be like, whatever wasn't working today. But if you're just relying on your voice, boy, it's tough,
Yes.
And
yes.
I want to just like respond to the what you were talking about knowing your material, and even if you think it's 3, you got a 3 out of 10, everyone else sees it as a 7 out of 10. Because I was recently invited to play at this festival in Ontario this summer. I had such a good time, and I was playing the violin, and there was this young man sharing my music stand, and he wasn't very good. He hadn't been obviously playing as many years as I had and been able to sight read, and he was having a tough time keeping up with the melody. So I said to him, look, he was like embarrassed and red-faced, and I should drop out, I shouldn't come to the next rehearsal. I said, no, of course you're coming to the next rehearsal. Like, imagine the people on the other side when we're performing. It's like seeing a band of 30 instead of 17 is going to be so much more impressive. And if you just play the first bar, like the first beat of each bar, and just play the chord, you're going to be looking the same as us, sounding the same as us. Just leave the fiddly stuff to us people that can manage that, and you still support in your own way. And I just think, well, that's a really interesting point about the practice, practice and the fake it till you make it. Like if you're projecting this idea out there, well, you're already doing it. You just need to build up the foundation or the practice underneath it,
Yeah, absolutely. And I find with most people, because that's one of the other reminders that, to get back to your original question, Jolene, with me around how do I help people? It's about reminding yourself that the reason why you're being asked to speak, same reason why you're being asked to play, Quentin, is because you're good. You know it. It's your stuff. It's your expertise. It's what you live with every day. You know it. The trick is being able to deliver it in a way to the audience that you're speaking to. And in this case, when you're speaking, it's about, as I said, I work a lot with my clients around really doing a good deep dive on your audience. You really have to know your audience. And definitely there are some assumptions made. You're not a mind reader. You can't know everything. But certainly knowing that whatever you're going to say hits them. And that's where I think a lot of the presentation work comes in. You already know your stuff, but it's delivering it in such a way that they're going to listen. Because audiences are really, they're everywhere. They're thinking about, I always tell them, coming back to that illusion of transparency, they're thinking about their kids at school. What are we going to have for dinner tonight? Yeah. What's going on at work? Their minds are all over the place, and you've got to get their attention. And so if you design your presentation in such a way with what you know, that part's done, but it's delivered in a way that wakes them up, has them pay attention, and leaves them with something. I think that's the key. That's what's so important. Same thing with music, of course. Same idea.
Yeah, there's always one thing at least someone's going to resonate with, right, in the audience. Like they may be zoning out half the time, but they'll hear this one thing that they're going to take away, and they're not going to notice all the, like so many times I've gotten up in front of a room or a group of people, and first thing that starts happening to me is my hands start sweating, my face feels red. I feel like people can see the sweat on me. And it's just, it's frustrating. And then the minute you kind of just start to breathe, I think last time we spoke, Chris, you mentioned this, and if it wasn't you, it was somebody else, but turning like your anxiety into excitement, because anxiety and excitement actually feel similar. And so if you can kind of shift your mindset into like, okay, I'm not nervous, this is me excited to be on the stage, and kind of flip that script a little bit, I think that also helps.
Like, follow and subscribe on LinkedIn, Instagram and YouTube, and find us at theconnectorshub.com.
So
true.
Could you share a time that you were doing a speech and there was maybe an apparent slip up, or how did you get back on track? Like, what did you do and how did you get back on track?
Yeah.
Or just even in your teachings with others, like how do you teach people how to kind of get over that part if they have a slip up?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because it really depends. I hate to get more technical on this, but it's sort of like the kind of slip up. So if we're talking about like a major one, I think you do have to draw the audience attention to it. And I've had that happen. The wrong slide comes up, or the video you want to show doesn't work. There's those obvious ones, or any of those things that are just so obvious. I think it's fine to say, well, that was great, and you can make a joke about it. And that's what I often tell people to do, is to kind of just make a joke about it, or just notice it, because people get it. It's happened. Mm-hmm. But if it's a subtle mistake, which is where I don't agree with drawing the audience's attention to you if you've made a mistake in something that you're going to say. Because you know what you're going to say word for word. You should know anyway, or at least have a good idea of what your presentation is. The audience doesn't. So if you miss something, they're not really going to notice a difference. Mm-hmm. So I get asked that by clients a lot around, do I say, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake? Or do I tell them I'm really nervous? Absolutely not. Trust me, everyone knows that public speaking is one of the biggest fears in the world. They already know you're nervous. And trust me, they're sitting there going, I'm glad it's you up there and not me. So they want you to succeed. So no need to draw that attention to it. So that's the first thing I mention to people, is that if you make a mistake, there's nothing wrong with a pause. As a matter of fact, a pause is one of the most powerful things that you can do as a speaker. It's incredibly powerful on stage too. If you ever think of your biggest villains and your creepiest people in movies or TV, they're very quiet. It's powerful. And so when you're speaking, if you make a mistake, take a pause. Because I know a lot of us feel that when you pause, it feels like it's like 10 minutes and you're probably only pausing for a few seconds, but it feels like a really, really long time. So I often tell clients, just pause, take a break, step back, pause, and then either grab your notes. If you've got notes, I've got nothing against notes as long as you're not reading them. They're just there to help you cue, for you to glance down and take a look and recover, or even on your slide. I often tell people, if there's something really, really important that you want to drive home, put it on a slide or put a word on a slide so you don't forget. It's right there for you in front of you so you don't forget to say that one key point. So always pause and then just continue on and then just move forward. And that's really, and actually a pause is excellent. Not only is it helpful for you, but it also allows an audience to catch up. Because often when we get up there and we speak, we want to keep people entertained. And so we fire everything off and we're always moving and we're doing this and we're saying that because we want to be high energy. But you always have to remember the audience has to take in what you're saying. I don't know if you've ever seen a speaker like that. I know I've watched a few speakers who just move with so much energy. It's exhausting. It's like, hang on, just pause for a second. Give me a break to let me catch up because I want to catch up to your point. I want to think about what you said. So taking a pause when you make a mistake or when you freeze is the best thing to do. And usually if you just calm yourself, take a deep breath, pause, even if it's just for a few seconds. And again, it's taking that deep breath and just being quiet, and the idea will come back to you, and then you'll pick up again, and it'll start again. I had that happen so many times on stage too. Can I tell a quick story? This is just classic story. Okay, this is one of the most unique things. On stage, here we are, small box theater, square box theater, and there we are on stage. The play was Arcadia by Tom Stopper. Very heavy, wordy play. But it was a great moment, and I was having this amazing moment with a wonderful actress on stage. Her and I were going back and forth, and it was this angry, spirited exchange, and we're going back and forth, and she's just ripping into me because she's really angry, and I'm standing there listening to her. And just as she was about to finish her line, she took a quick pause before she dropped this line on me, and we hear this screaming going on. This extreme foul language going on, this like, excuse me for saying this, but just say, F you. And we kind of look at each other, right? There's that famous moment, actors know this. You get that 1,000-mile stare. You kind of look at each other and go, okay, what was that? Now what do we do? So It was my turn. I picked up the ball, started to continue, and I heard it again. Heard another scream, you son of a b. And all of a sudden, it was bang, kick, smash. It was just... There was a fight going on just outside the theater. And we're standing there, and of course, we're totally lost now. The whole scene is gone. The audience is gone. They're paying attention to the fight, not to us on stage. But we just stood there, stayed in character, because you're always taught that. Don't drop out of character. So we just kind of stood there in silence while this thing just continued on. Once it settled down, because finally I think the police came actually and settled it down. It took a few minutes. Or somebody settled it down. We just picked up and continue. And the lesson there that I learned is that one of the reasons why I could pick up and continue was practice. I knew it so well. I knew when I got thrown off, I had a long pause, so I had moments to kind of regain myself, think where I was, back into character, and just continued on. So yeah, anything can happen. It's not necessarily you forgetting something or making a mistake. It can actually be something else that throws you right off as well. So yeah, that was hilarious. Once in my life that happened.
Yeah, talk about distraction, right? Yeah.
Talk about breaking the fourth
Couldn't believe
wall.
it.
And you're trying to be so professional, and then meanwhile there's pandemonium going on in the streets outside.
Exactly. Yeah, and I was playing this pompous character, and so I was standing there like this. I was this real arrogant guy, and I didn't move out of this pose for like forever. If I move, I'm going to lose it. And sort of. The little actor on stage was looking at me too. We're both looking at each other, going, "Okay, how do we play this?
When do we pick up again?"
Yeah, exactly. Because the audience was gone. They had totally left us. They were more curious about the fight than us on stage.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. So
it's a good point. It's a good point about bringing the audience with you, like whether it's taking a pause in your speech and letting the audience catch up with their thoughts, or when all sorts of stuff is going on, somehow grabbing their attention and pulling it back in and saying, "Come, let's move on together." It's a tough technique to learn.
It's not easy. I agree. Yeah, that's a tricky one. But I always encourage people, let it happen, because you're not going to get better at it if you don't try it. You're not going to get better. You're not going to know how you deal with that if it doesn't happen. And if you speak enough in front of people enough, and you get up in front of a crowd often enough, it's going to happen. Mistakes happen, things happen, and run out of our control. Sometimes they're in our control, sometimes they're not. So it's if you can turn it into a gift, sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, but it's fine. People forget the audience always wants you to succeed. They don't want you to fail. And I'm sure you know, if you've been audience members, how comfortable are you when someone's up there struggling? It's so hard to watch. It's just so
I've seen it a
but
few
you're cheering them on at the same time.
Yeah, and you're
It's
sitting
true.
there, and I think I'm feeling worse than they are.
Now you
So-
mentioned you mentioned, Chris, you
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily call out a mistake, but I have seen people call out certain things, like you said, if a wrong slide comes up, or they do
Yes.
fumble through something, or maybe there was a distraction in the distance. Like it sometimes can be humorous to call out the thing and just say, okay, well, I messed that up, but let's move on. Like I've seen that too, and sometimes
Yes.
it just creates this nice kind of like relaxing moment for everybody to kind of just call it out and then move on. So
Absolutely.
Attention.
Absolutely. It's kind of like I said, if it's a big one kind of thing, if it's a real obvious visual mistake, then absolutely. It can create a lot of fun.
Yeah.
To alleviate some tension. It's great. What I'm referring to is if you make a mistake in your words that only really you know about, that's not
Yeah.
obvious to the audience, I'm not sure I'd bring that up. I think I would just move on and carry on because they're not going to notice. You notice, but chances are they're not. So.
So I want to ask a question about sort of business and connections. And in your sort of intake, you mentioned business are about connections. What does true connection in leadership look like to you, and how can it be sometimes overlooked?
Yeah. To me, true connection is really, I think it really starts with connecting with people. If you're a business leader, connecting with your team on things that are not about the business. Don't connect about it. True connection is asking people on more of a personal level, how are things going? Where you're at. Getting to know people on a level that is deeper. And I know we have to be cautious of that. I understand that. That's a step you have to be careful of, but because you can overshare and you may ask something that goes too far. But most of the time, if you're just getting to know people, something about their family, where they're from, something about them. I know when I started doing that as a leader, and I learned that from a mentor of mine very early on in my leadership career in business, the difference was unbelievable. You see the change with people when you truly know them on a different level, other than just the fact that they do the numbers for you or they do whatever job it is that they're doing in the company. Knowing them on a bit more of a personal level is a true connection. And it's overlooked because, one, I think there's fear sometimes in getting to know people. There's that fear about getting too personal. But I think we all can understand what's too personal and what's just, personal enough to get to know someone beyond just what they do for a job. And I think it gets easily overlooked because, and I've been in this position too, I've got to make, $15 million in revenue this year. I've got shareholders angry. I've got customers angry. And my day is just so busy. And I get so caught up in that because I'm getting pressure from the people that I report to deliver on that I forget about the people. And I think it's so easy to forget about making those connections. And then we go back to that's just someone who does that job for me, as opposed to actually being a real human being that's got family things and things going on in their life. And what's wrong with asking them about that? What's wrong with making that connection? So my goal always was as a leader was that I would always try to find something personal about one of my employees. Obviously, first and foremost, know their name, which sadly sometimes doesn't happen in larger organizations, but know the person and then know something about them. Maybe their child plays in a specific sport, or maybe their wife is going away, or their partner's going away, whatever the case may be. Any kind of easy way to reconnect with them, I think it makes people feel so much more connected to you as a leader and to your organization. But it is very easily overlooked when you're trying to crank out numbers and deal with customer issues. So
yeah, that's such a good point. Go ahead, Quinn.
Yeah, I just had the thought, oh wow, that's one of the techniques that people standing up for comedy, like these improvisers of comedy, they stand up and they've they've got their shtick, they've got their jokes, but like, how do you start it off? Well, you tell people about a situation that they've all been in many times, and then you add your own personal funny spin on how it happened to you. So everyone hates going around a parking lot trying to find, the car park that's closest to the store door. Well, let me tell you about this time, blah, 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 blah. And it works.
It does, yeah.
Get people to align, show them that you've been in their shoes, or that you're hearing them, or that you sympathize or empathize with them in some way. And obviously people are going to draw closer, and there's going to be this like aligned sense of connection in it.
I agree. And I think there's so many, that's the other thing I've talked to a few business leaders about. What do I connect with them on? What do I connect with people on? I would start with anything. TV shows, sports teams, activity, like all those interests. There's just so many things that you're able to connect with people on. And as you say, Quentin, it's just the minute you find that connection where you have something in common, boom, there's a connection that's on a deeper level than, as I said, just knowing them as the person that does that job for you. And I think it's incredibly powerful. And now they have a connection with you. And I think sometimes that's just such a powerful thing. And productivity increases, and they feel like they're part of something. Because at the end of the day, we all want to belong and be accepted. And I think businesses are this small community in many cases, and you want to be able to create that sense that I belong and I'm connected. And those kinds of, real deep personal connections can really be helpful in doing that.
You made a good point, Chris, about, sometimes it's overlooked, to make these types of connections in business, but it's also people probably fear a little bit of the vulnerability. They don't want people to know their business. Maybe they don't know how to connect because maybe in the past they've tried that, and then maybe somebody, talked about them or told somebody else about their personal life or their stories. And I think that to me, the understanding is that you can connect on a lot of different things, like we just talked about. You could talk about the weather if you want to, but
that's true.
But how you truly connect to somebody is having a little bit of vulnerability, and I think what that also needs to show up as is trust. So you have to have good rapport and trust with somebody to say certain things. And
Agreed.
Recognize maybe you can only get to a certain level with certain people, and other people you can trust a bit more. There's always a way to connect, to find a common ground or a commonality, I believe, as well, whether it's like you said, maybe two people like cars, or you both have dogs, or whatever it is, whatever the thing is. But to go deeper, you have to have trust, I believe, with people. So
absolutely,
yeah,
so true. Yes, great point. And and you have to be able to know where that is. And sometimes mistakes are made, and that happens. Sometimes there's oversharing, and there's people you meet who tell you everything, and then there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, that's great, I don't need to hear that. But absolutely, you're absolutely right. It does develop trust highly, and that needs to be in place before you take that next step, for sure. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. So if you had to give a piece of advice to leaders that want to leave a lasting impact using their voice, and they were coming to you and they said, I have this speech that I want to talk about why people should come see me for business, what would your sort of first question to them be about that?
I think I would ask them if they have a story around that, because I think stories are the most powerful but yet most underutilized business tool out there. Not enough businesses or business leaders leverage storytelling. It's incredibly powerful. So we talk about vulnerability, and we talk about, and I think we can all be in agreement. I mean, this has been out there for a long time now, that business is emotional. Business decisions are emotional. If you think they're not, I think you're fooling yourself, because they are. So when I talk to people, business leaders, about getting up, the first thing, because everybody talks too about authenticity, about being real, and sort of opening that up and being more vulnerable. One of the best ways to get there as a speaker is to tell a story. Because storytelling, because it's been part of our existence forever, storytelling has been part of human existence. And so it is physiologically wired in our bodies that when we hear a story, or when we tell a story that's personal to us, like a personal story, and again, a safe personal story, just an anecdote maybe, but a story, sharing an experience I had to illustrate a point, I connect with my emotions, and I speak on a different level. And I've watched and I've listened to speakers when they tell a story, there's a difference. Their tone, their pace, their intonation, you can see them relax. Not only that, but the number of times I've seen an audience, where they're rustling in their seats or they're checking their phones or they're talking to the person next to them. The minute a story happens, boom. Watch the room. Everybody starts to listen because we connect with stories. And that chemical cocktail that happens in our bodies physiologically when we hear stories, that's when you can start to connect with people authentically. That's where you can start to leave an impression, particularly if it's a story that the audience can relate to. Because audiences just release those chemicals that make us better listeners, make us more connected to our emotions, make us more open to better ideas. That's where people get up and leave and they go, you know what? I remember that guy speaking. That was a great story. And it moves them. And that's where that connection can be. That's the lasting impression. That's where I think in most presentations that where you're memorable. Yes, the data has to be there and what you're saying has to be relevant. There's no doubt about that. But to really drive it home, I always start with a story. As a matter of fact, I don't think you can do a good presentation or a good speech or wherever you're speaking in front of a group if you don't have a story. And I think that's just incredibly powerful. And that's where I instruct a lot of business leaders. You want to make an impression, tell a story.
I was just thinking about your reason for telling people that this is a good technique to start off with, to start a speech with, or to make sure that the speech hinges around this. And then I was thinking of all the other sort of documents and reports that we put out in business, white papers and data reporting and spreadsheets and end of year reports and AGMs and blah, 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 blah. And none of them are short, have a clear beginning, middle, end, have a clear resolution that is satisfactory. Because business is all about quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, quarter four, and then next year's quarter one, it's like this never-ending monster that just keeps going down the train tracks, gobbling. It never has a satisfactory beginning, middle, or an end.
Right.
So maybe it's something about that, and something about our human capacity for staying engaged. Like, we can't stay engaged for 20 minutes on one thing super focused. So maybe a story is the perfect way to do it. You've got this little 2-minute nugget that holds everything about what you want to talk about, and people can digest this in an easy way and say, okay, now I know what he's talking about. Whereas opening up a slide with 80 slides of facts and figures and presentation stuff is not going to catch people.
The biggest eye roll I could give.
Oh, you got it.
God.
Absolutely. And I always tell clients, if that's what you're going to do, send them that information.
Yes.
Don't put it on the slide.
God knows.
Send that. I want to hear what you think. Hey, your dad is great. Fantastic. You're a smart person. Wonderful. They know that already. That's why they're there to see you. Tell them something they don't know. They probably don't know about the personal story you have in collecting that data, or the personal story of what you think of that data is. That's where now you've got something interesting. Now you've got something where people go, because a personal story is yours, and you're going to stand out and you're going to be memorable. If it's the cookie cutter approach, and we still see them, and I understand sometimes there's maybe the reverse situation where this is applicable, slide, talk, slide, talk, slide, talk. Fair enough. But I think the majority of the time, if not all the time, adding a story is what really can change your presentation. So when people get up and leave, because we all know, like, audience members are, just as people in general, we don't remember much. I mean, we're lucky if we remember one or two things after someone does a presentation. Make that the important thing. Don't make it your numbers, because that'll just be forgotten. That's just another presentation. Give me something to think about that moves me a little bit, that reaches me a little bit. And as I said, if you're telling the story, if you're vulnerable, the audience is going to feel that vulnerability, and they're going to respond that way as well. So I think it's very powerful.
A story is always open to interpretation too, right? Where data is not. Like, data's facts. Okay, you can see the facts, great, and we probably need those, but the story is always open to interpretation. It's going to hit people differently. Quentin, I think this is genius. This is something I think, Like, no, if I start, when I
Thank
think
you,
about
Joe.
when I was in my on a Monday already.
Wow.
When I was in corporate, I think about that. It's true. Like, we would start the year off, or the end of the previous year, figuring out our next 4 quarters.
Yeah.
And if it was told in like a story type of way, this is what our story is, and this is how we're going to move the needle, and this is where, we have this little guy that's maybe starting here, and it shows this whole little story of the year and what it's going to look like. I think that would be a cool way to get people on board. Yeah, I love that.
It certainly has a lot more buy-in. Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah.
It could.
People will buy in. I think
People
it's,
are buying. Or if you show them their beginning, middle, and end of that project, they're like, oh, look, this story is coming to the train station. It's about to offload and be finished. Right. Isn't that amazing? Like, follow, and subscribe on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. And find us at theconnectorshub.com.
Us here, we're all entrepreneurs, which is pretty cool, or solopreneurs, and as we know, that comes with a lot of challenges and failures and obstacles and things that we have to try. And I know that you're of the mentality, Chris, that making mistakes is a gift. So sometimes business doesn't see it that way. And right. I want to talk a little bit more about that. What are some things that you've noticed with your own, I guess, personal successes and failures, and what have they taught you, and what could they be teaching more of us?
Yeah. And it's, I haven't got to the point yet where I can look at when I've made a mistake, or I've done something. I did something this morning that really hung over me. Trying to find the gift in it, because I really believe that is the case. And I know it sounds so cliche, and some people think it's a bit woo-woo, however you want to put it, but it's so true. When I think back on things in my life, the biggest mistakes I made, like just really big mistakes, it was so positive in the end. The impact down the road was so incredibly positive. It opened up a whole other door for me. I was let go. I was thrown out on the street after 15 years. They cut my position. That's dreadful. That's hard. And maybe that's not a mistake or a failure, but it feels like it at the time. But it really turned me around and got me into another line of work that allowed me to be able to perform on stage. That never would have happened. To perform on stage while I was working full-time. I found the dream job to make that work. That never would have happened if I hadn't have been let go from that first job. And there are so many instances in my life where those mistakes were so incredibly valuable. But yet, I still struggle with, when they happen, that you don't carry that cloud and you kind of beat yourself up and you're embarrassed and you kind of go through that what do they call that doom loop in your mind that just keeps spinning. But yet, if you're patient enough and just wait, and if you can change that mindset and start to think, okay, what's the gift here? What's the learning here? What's this telling me? And that's just a part of me. That's just a part of me here. It's not all of me, which is the other thing I could get into. You make a mistake and a failure, you're a complete failure as a human being. So it's trying to get out of that sort of mindset, right? And try to just say, that was just a part of me. That was an error. I remember, really quick story. I'll never forget that. I transferred from another city to another job. I'd been trying to get a higher position in this organization. I finally got my opportunity, but I had to move my family. So my family, we moved to another city. I walked into this place very early in my management career. And I walked in, man, and I was just going to move this place. Here we go. I'm going to turn this place around. It's going to be beautiful and a success. 3 months into the job, I'll never forget it. Walking down the hallway in the building, going down to get a drink at the water fountain. 2 staff were around the corner who didn't see me. And I overheard the one say, "Have you signed that petition yet?" "Oh, you mean..." Then the other person responded by saying, "Oh, you mean the petition to get rid of that idiot that was just brought in? Yeah, everybody's signing it, and we'll be rid of him soon." I just was like, they didn't see me, and I kid you not, those were the words. I slowly, quietly got away, as I didn't want them to see me. I stepped back. I was, those moments, if you've ever had them in your life, I haven't had too many like this, where you're just blown away. You're just like, okay, now what do I do? And I think I walked for about 2 hours outside and just walked. How am I going to tell my family? We moved our kids here, like, okay, we got to go. I'm out of work. What am I going to do? And all that stuff had to come out, and I went through all of that. But something, somehow, somewhere, I don't know, it dawned on me, I got to make this work. And I went back, and I connected with one person who the rest of the staff seemed to have respect with, and I sat them down. Wonderful individual, probably one of the best people I ever worked with in my entire business career, Linda Larson. Linda, if you're listening, I still think you're amazing. And we sat down and we had a conversation, and Linda became my spokesperson. I stepped back, and I started to kind of restart, and she, and along with one or two other staff, guided me to come back into that. And what I learned from that, the biggest lesson, was I had to connect and get to know the staff. You just can't walk in. I mean, I look back on what I did now, and I can't believe I made those mistakes. You know, like you walk in and you're telling them things. You're not even asking them what they want to do. You're not even engaging them. You're just telling them that's what they're going to do. I didn't even know who they were. They just had a job to do, and their job was to do this, to make me look good. Yeah, that was my attitude. That was my immature leadership style at that point. But that incident changed my life. I turned around, and I knew what it meant to connect. And I gradually started to build some of those relationships back up. And I started talking to people. I went out of my way every single day, which is one of the things I stress. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a speaking engagement in Windsor on September 23rd, and that's my topic. Your most valuable 5 minutes a day. That as a leader, you get up intentionally every day, take 5 minutes, and go connect with an employee. Just go chat. How are you? How you doing? How are things going? Talk to me a little bit. Make those connections. Because when I started doing that in that job that the petition was written on, it turned things around. And that's where I understood the value of connecting with people and building those relationships just beyond doing the job. But I never would have learned that if I hadn't made that major mistake. We ended up turning the whole place around. The big thing for me was that a number of the people that were in there became managers in the future in the organization. So it all turned around really, really well within a few years, but valuable lesson that can come out of a failure. And that was probably one of my biggest ones. I don't know how many people have ever had a petition written about them to get rid of them. That was hard to take. It's like, wow, they really hated me. And yeah, they did. And as I look back on it, they had every right to. Anyway, those kinds of things, I think they always inevitably turn around to be something very positive for you. You may not see it right away. You may not realize it right away. For instance, it took me a long time to really kind of put all of that together, but they're so incredibly valuable. So yeah, mistakes are incredibly important. And I'll never forget meeting a manager. I was at a talk once years ago, and he said in his office, he puts up a big poster. He got it first day on the job, and the banner said, "Make mistakes and fail more often." That was his message to his leadership team. And I thought, wow, what a powerful message. You imagine that your boss comes in and says, fail more often and make mistakes. Because he knew the value in that. So I just think it's just incredibly powerful to be able to have that and understand that if you can. I think mistakes and failures are so valuable.
It's an interesting point because like what you're describing is a style of leadership, and you came in with that old style of leadership, which is very top-down, hierarchical, which is, yeah, I've got the title of director, which means that I'm on this pedestal, and you've got the title of manager, which means you're on a lower pedestal, and then there's all the lackeys below us. And everyone is supposedly aligned to do this and to go along with my vision. But like that, as you said, that type of leadership's old. It's like no longer the way it's done. And I think last year it was, or maybe, yeah, let's say last year, I came across this book about servant leadership. And the writer was this guy called Greenleaf, I think, and he was the one who coined this term about servant leadership, and it was exactly what you then discovered was the right way or the better way to be a leader. Chat with people, make a relationship, get them on your side, listen to their points of view and their problems and how you can solve that for them. And it's just I guess my point is that it's an interesting thing to note that there are these different leadership styles, and some will get you closer to your goal as the director, and some will not get you that way. But it's always the human connections piece in the center that is going to push the project further along than if you're not connecting with the people around you.
I'm a firm believer that, all the numbers, if you're looking after your people and you're connecting with them and you've got that trust in those relationships, the numbers look after themselves. I think you've got to flip the focus there. So
I appreciate that story, Chris, and thank you for sharing it. I think last time we spoke, we talked about Ted Lasso. And and I just rewatched the episode the other day that was about the DART one, where he's talking about be curious, not judgmental, right?
Yes.
Because if you ask people questions, you're going to find out more than making assumptions and more than just sort of judging what's already going on. From your perspective. So I'm a firm believer in that. The more that we get curious, we connect with people better than if we just assume we know better or what's going on. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I really appreciate that story. And I also find too that anyone I've spoken to that has created their own business or their own thing out of adversity and challenge in their own life, it's made something beautiful, right? Even for Quentin and I creating the Connectors, we have our own personal stories as to why we wanted to start this show. And I've recognized for me, it's been a life of disconnection that I've led in my past that led me to want to connect better with other people. Yeah. So reflecting on my upbringing and reflecting in the places and experiences that I had, I can see all the areas in which I was extremely disconnected. So getting more connected was somehow this undertone I didn't even realize until it started to come out. And I was like, oh, okay, that's what that was. I needed to connect with people better.
Yeah.
Yeah, so fun to share these stories with each other and see what comes out, for sure.
Oh, I think everybody has them. I think everybody's journey is amazing. And I think that's where a lot of your stories come from. So if you're wondering, because often with working with clients, when I talk about stories, there's that, well, I'm not creative. I mean, it's easy for you. You were an actor for a while. I was like, yeah, but I didn't write anything. Everything was already written for me. But where those stories come from, and I tell people, your own personal experience, you've got lost. Just look at your own journey. And there's dozens of stories in anyone's journey that's just interesting that you will be able to apply, I believe, in any business situation. You'll be able to take that story and make the connection. It's not hard. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Those stories and our journeys are incredibly powerful. And interesting.
Well, this was a really awesome conversation. I have so many great takeaways from today, and I'm sure that our audience will as well. Is there anything else that you would like our audience to know about you, Chris, and where they can connect with you?
Nothing else more to know about me. Certainly my LinkedIn is my most, I'm on there a lot. So just punch in Chris McAuley. There's several of us. So you'd have to look for the speaking coach, public speaking coach. If you punch that in with Chris McAuley, you'll find me. My website is www.chrismcauley.co. So that's CHRISMCAULEY.co. And you'll find my website. There's an easy way to connect with me on there as well.
Thank you, Chris, for letting us know where we can get hold of you. We're going to make sure that your LinkedIn and your website link are in the show notes so that our listeners can reach out for their leadership speaking engagements.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh,
really
thank
excited.
you.
Yeah, thank you for
Yeah, it was great being here.
Chris.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Thank you.